Well, when you hear the word mist, do you think of like Six Flags, like, getting like cooled down as you're walking through the park? Is that what you think?
Yes. That's what I think. I
Okay.
think of like Splash Mountain, but like not a lot of splash sometimes. Like, you're
Okay.
like on the outskirts where you're not in the splash zone, but you get a
Yeah,
little
sure,
mist
sure.
on you. Like, that's where
Mhm.
my brain goes.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
See dead people.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hello, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie,
And Nikisha.
where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone. Or should I say, miss, all around? Because today, oh yeah, that's a better sound.
Well, when you hear the word mist, do you think of like Six Flags, like, getting like cooled down as you're walking through the park? Is that what you think?
Yes. That's what I think. I
Okay.
think of like Splash Mountain, but like not a lot of splash sometimes. Like, you're
Okay.
like on the outskirts where you're not in the splash zone, but you get
Yeah,
a little
sure,
mist
sure.
on you. Like, that's where my brain goes.
Great.
Yes.
But that's not what we're talking about today at all.
We're not talking about parks or Disneyland. If you haven't figured it out, today we're talking about the 2007, woo woo, when I graduated, science fiction horror film, The Mist. Jamie, you're laughing, but you also graduated in 07.
I did.
Correct?
That's why I laughed.
Yes, fantastic. What a good year. So this movie was based off of the 1980 novella The Mist by Stephen King, and it was written and directed by Frank Darabont. He's French, guys. That's me
Yes.
pronouncing it correctly in French. It stars one Thomas Jane, Marcia Gay Harden, and half the cast of The Walking Dead. So if you're familiar with that, they're all in there, guys. Even Carol, good old stay strong Carol is
always looking for her kids.
always. We'll talk about that later.
Is
But
it Marsha? I think it's Marsha Gay Harden.
oh, you're right. I was trying to be proper. Marsha.
Proper.
Marsha. Thank you for that. Oh, also shout out to the late great Andre Braugher, who is
Yeah.
in this as well, which I did not realize.
I'd forgotten too. I actually forgot a lot. I didn't remember Sam Witwer was in this. A lot of people
Yeah.
I forgot were actually
Yeah.
in this movie.
Toby Jones.
Yeah.
I was like,
I
where
mean,
are
it's
these
a-
people coming from?
Right, it's a
Stacked
stacked cast.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, fun fact: this movie, just randomly, this movie was filmed in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is where my mother is from, and we used to visit there every year. Which is really wild that it's because there's nothing in Shreveport, Louisiana. But
Not
that
even
kinda
a
makes
food. The
sense.
food house. You didn't go to the food house.
Right. That was the exact name of the grocery store too. The Food
Yes,
House.
the food house.
It was wonderful. So obviously heavy spoilers for The Mist, not to be confused with The Fog, like I did before. And Jamie, please give us all the trigger warnings for this.
Yeah, this is a science fiction horror. There's big scary monsters doing some pretty destructive work on these people, insides on the outside, body parts ripped apart.
Ooh, yeah.
You just see some legs not attached to anything.
Just legs.
Yeah, just legs. You see some flesh ripping, someone on fire, and subsequent burns, people being shot, people being eaten, tentacles sucking people away, bugs cocooning people, lots of bugs. If you don't like bugs
Lots
or
of
tentacles,
bugs.
major
Spiders.
trigger warning for you.
Oof.
Yeah, big
Suicide.
old bugs.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
suicide.
and then the major trigger at the end, suicide. Did I miss
Even
And in the
anything?
throughout,
middle,
there's like
the
multiple.
pills.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the
Yeah.
hanging. There's a
Oh
lot.
yeah. You're right. Yeah, I think I block out unpleasant things. I just
So
forgot
Jamie
all
didn't
of
watch
it.
the second half of this movie, blocking out unpleasant things.
Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. Okay, well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this, but before we get into that, producer Brian, please give us all of the words.
Yes, we have a special guest today. We are so excited. This is our first guest of 2024. We're super excited to welcome the main man behind the Best Picture cast, which he'll explain momentarily. We have Kieran Black with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me. I wasn't sure when I popped through the curtain or not, so I just I stayed back.
Oh,
until
you
the
could have.
grand
Doesn't matter.
introduction.
We are big advocates of talking before you're introduced. A lot of
All right.
mystery is added to that.
Good,
Right.
good. Yeah, you could add crowded supermarkets to your trigger list too.
Yeah, that's a good one
Yeah,
too.
very true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I'm super excited to be here, guys. As I love this podcast, you guys just pump out impressive content weekly, and you cover so many great films that when it was time to pick one, I wasn't sure if I go through the list like, please don't be on there, please don't be on there, and the list
Right.
was not. And I'm glad it wasn't, because I'm happy to be here, because this is not one I would have wanted. This is not one I would have wanted. This is I didn't quite land it. I wouldn't have wanted to miss this one. I wouldn't have wanted to miss it.
You got it.
Not one I would have wanted to miss.
Yes.
So before we get into it, as a reminder, you can find us wherever you get content. We are on TikTok. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram. We are on YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
Hello.
That is, of course, at Talk Horror Pod. But we don't want to talk about our pod anymore. We want to talk about Kieran's pod. So, Kieran, tell me a little bit. I mean, I know, but for our listeners, like, tell us a little bit about the concept of Best Picture pod, Best Picture cast. Excuse me. Tell us a little bit about like your main kind of content there, and then I know you do worst picture stuff and all of that fun stuff and horror stuff. So, tell us all about it. It's a super cool concept, and it's a really fun cast with rotating guests.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks for that. Best Picture cast is something we started, and we're just about to celebrate our 4th anniversary. And essentially, what we're doing is the main idea around it is we're taking a different Best Picture winner from the 95 plus years of Best Pictures, and we sit down with a crew of us. The crew's I host every episode. The crew's a little different here or there. A lot of returning people, and we sit and we hash it out, and we have kind of like a little social circle. We don't take ourselves too seriously. But we have a good time talking, and we go and we do it long form. So we go every stone to unturned, we turn, and we bounce around. We don't do it in order. One week we're covering something from 1930. The next week we're covering something from the 2010s, and it bounces all around there. We're about 2/3 of the way through the list by now, which is
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
That's awesome.
I think we're around we're in our 64th episode is coming out this week. So.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, sometimes you're talking about something as as heavy as The Godfather, and then the other time you're talking about a goofy movie from the 30s, Cimarron, which is considered one of the worst. So we
Sure.
always try to mix a laugh in or two, or and have some fun with it, even though some of these movies can be a little dire or a little dense, or just sometimes flat out snooze fests. But we try to have as much fun as we can with them. In
Fantastic.
addition to that, we do tournaments too. We do social media tournaments on Twitter and Instagram, and basically let the people pick what our next movie will be. So we do our horror one every year. Jamie and Brian, you guys were both involved in that. You had a couple picks in that mix from our draft. And the winner gets its own episode. So we do one seasonally. In March, we do kind of like a genre run. And then in the summer, we do a sub 51, which is anything that's under 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's kind of our bad movie tournament.
Sure.
So that kind of changes the pace a little. So we're not just talking about the prestige, quote unquote, Oscar type movies.
Yeah, my goal in life now is to win that draft and that bracket.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Now that I know kind of like how people vote a little bit more, and like I've been through the process. Like I'm coming for it next
I'm
year
invested.
or later this year. Yeah.
Well, I still haven't won one, so you'll probably win one before me. I pick movies like The Mist and never win. So
Yeah. Well, on that note, why did you pick The Mist? Like, do you love Frankie Boy? Do you love Stephen King? Do you love both of them? You just wanted us to see the ending again? Like, what?
Oh man, how many bullets do we have? No, okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm a huge Stephen King guy, and I'm a big Frank Darabont guy too. My favorite movie of all time is The Shawshank Redemption. That's my number one, and I've just Stephen King's my favorite author. So you know, I read Pet Sematary about 10 years ago, and it just blew me away. And I'm like, I gotta, you know, that's to this day is my favorite book of all time. And I was like, I got to get into more of this guy's stuff, and just kind of went on a Stephen King barrage from there. And in reading a lot of his kind of bigger novels, whether it was Pet Sematary or The Shining or It or 11/22/63, you know, there got to a point where, like, you know, he's got these short stories that he's famous for. So obviously, The Shawshank Redemption being one of them, a novella.
Right.
So let me just get a random collection, and we'll just go. And so I got The Skeleton Key, and the first story in The Skeleton Key is The Mist, and it's the biggest story in the Mist. It's also a novella. And boy, was I blown away by this novella. How descriptive is, how well he develops the characters and interactions with this wild setting that he crafted. And I had never seen the movie. I mean, this is when I read The Mist, it was probably like 2015 or so. So the movie had been out. It was one that I just kind of just never got to. And then I was like, you know, there is a movie on this. So watched the movie, was blown away. The movie and the novella end very differently, and I'm sure we'll discuss. The novella essentially doesn't have an ending. They just kind of drive off into the mist, and that's that. But yeah, so the movie really kind of left an impact on me too. Frank Darabont, he only has 4 works, but you know, all ones that I love. So yeah, I mean, this seemed like a good fit because I get both of my guys in there, Stephen King and Frank Darabont. And as you mentioned, Frank Darabont also was the creator of The Walking Dead. I think was only involved in the first 2 seasons or so. You know, they're up to like 19 by now, I'm sure. But
Yes.
yeah, so.
11. I'm almost done.
Were they going to die of old age? Is that?
Well, it ended. It ended.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Yes.
waiting. I'm making my way. I'm for some reason I feel like I need to finish it out of obligation. So I've got like 10 more episodes left in season 11. I'll watch the movie that's coming out this summer, and then I'll retire it.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's so many sub like TV series too.
Yeah,
so, like,
there's
maybe
like
they
Fear
will
the
dive
Walking
old age.
Dead. Yeah,
Like Daryl?
Daryl in France.
Yes.
But yeah, and Frank Darabont he show ran season 1. He directed the pilot, and he wrote he has sole credit on like 1 or 2 episodes in season 1, which is only 6 episodes, I think. And he has partial credit on others. And then he fired the entire. I think no one really knows what happened, but they like fired the entire writing staff for season 2, and he was going to freelance people, and then he ended up like only being minorly involved in season 2, but he's still on all the credits as one of the creators, so he's getting, you know, get that paycheck. But yeah, it's interesting because you said he only did, what is it, Shawshank, Green Mile, this, and the Majestic, and he just like kind of like doesn't do much anymore, at least in front, like from a PR perspective.
Yeah, I don't know what the exact story is. If he was, I think whatever problems he had with The Walking Dead kind of might have led to his quote unquote being blacklisted or not being used.
Sure.
Or just kind of like they lost his number, you know.
Yeah.
But I think he's now kind of just in a semi retirement too. You'll see him do interviews here and there. But it is kind of a shame that he only has the 4 works. You know, Shawshank being his first, and The Mist goes out with that ending. You know, two movies that have very, very different endings.
He literally
you know,
went out
pertaining
with
to
a
hope.
bang.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
he needed one more bang.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and Green Mile's a good one too. I dig the Green Mile also.
Love Green
Yeah.
Mile. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, let's get into it. You guys are here for The Mist. Here in it, in the midst of it. Yes.
Yes.
But before,
Good
actually,
one.
no, one more thing before we get into a plot summary, which Kieran will happily give to us. Did y'all watch anything new before we get into this? I know I haven't had any time to.
I finished Reservation Dogs, the full 3 seasons. It was spectacular. Not
Nice.
horror, obviously, but like
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that people know it exists and they can watch it because it's absolutely spectacular. It's only 3 seasons. It's on Hulu. It's absolutely wonderful. Definitely check out Reservation Dogs.
Nice. Well, since I've been doing this podcast and making it more known that I love horror, some of my castmates will come up to me and be like, "Oh, I just watched this. Have you seen this?" So there was one girl, I'm gonna shout out Nicole, who came up to me and said, "Oh my God, I just watched Pearl. Have you seen Pearl?" And I'm like, "Don't get me started on my girl Pearl, because I love her and she is fantastic." But she was like, "I was not expecting that." I was like, "Okay, yes, and now you have to watch X, and now you have to wait with the rest of us for Maxine to come out, so you can have the full experience of Miss Pearl." But fantastic. Okay, well, let's get into this plot summary. Kieran, you have 2 minutes on the clock to give us, as best you can, no pressure, the plot summary of The Mist, and Jamie will time you and give you the go ahead.
What's the plot?
All right, you just let me know when to go. Fire the gun off, and we'll be ready to go.
Honestly, that is not going to get old. That isn't.
Oh, man. All right. So, Kieran, you have 2 minutes on the clock to give us your best rundown of what happens in The Mist. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Ready, set, go.
Okay, so my boy Thomas Jane, he's a painter. He's there painting some Stephen King Easter eggs. There's a big old storm. Tree goes through the house. Tree lands on the boathouse. Him and his wife and his son, they go out and they see the boathouse is crushed. Oh, it was the neighbor's tree. I told him to take that down. Let me go mess with him. So he goes across the street to the neighbor Brent, who is really distraught about his car getting crushed. So they seem to bond through their tree trauma, and they get in a car and they head to town with the son. Wife has to stay behind. So they go to the supermarket, the hardware store, to get their stuff. All of a sudden, there's a mist running through the parking lot. A guy comes screaming, "There's something to miss, something to miss." He gets in the supermarket. They're in the supermarket. Everybody's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. There's a little should I stay or should I go thing going on. And the Shermanator for American Pie is in the back trying to fix a generator. He gets taken away with tentacles, but only some of them see it. So they come out, and then there's this, "Oh, I don't believe you. This didn't happen." So Brent gets his stuff together, and he says he's got his crew, and they said, "We're going." So they go, and it doesn't work out well for them. The people who stay now are kind of doing their own thing. Marcia Gay Harden's in it. She's Mother Carmody. She's kind of like in her own movie, doing her own thing. And now the nightfall comes, bugs and pterodactyls attack, and now Thomas Jane's like, "All right, we got to get out of here," because everyone's starting to join Mother Carmody's movie, and she's talking about sacrificing people. And they go to the pharmacy, there's spiders, but now they're like, "We got to get out of here." So he gets a crew of like 8 or so to get in his van to drive off. Only about 5 of them make it. 3 of them, go along the way. So they go check in on the mom. Mom not doing so well. Spiders got to her, so they got to drive off. There's some like Lovecraftian dinosaurs going on. Things aren't going well. They've run out of gas. And we are left with one of the most effed up endings in movie history, and we will talk about that today. So there we go. Limits.
Whoa! That's so good.
That was great. That was excellent.
That's the plot.
I did my best. I might have missed
That
was so good.
That was one of the best summaries ever.
Yes.
And you even left it on a cliffhanger. I love that.
Right. It's like we'll get into it. My favorite thing though was the tree trauma. Let's all share in our tree trauma.
Tree trauma.
Living in the Northeast, the tree trauma is real. And I told no, I'm not an easily triggered character. So, but I did tell you when you guys guessed it on BPC, one of my triggers is that alarm sound in the morning when you wake up. And I didn't want to hear that today, so I had to get through this thing.
Yeah, fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Dennis Reynolds, that buzzing sound. I don't like that.
So I think that's a perfect opportunity. Let's talk about the ending here. Literally just plot, and we'll break it down so that we can all have a more robust conversation about it. And let's also talk about how the novella ends, so that I'm sure at some point we'll get into like, which do you prefer narratively? Which one do you think supports the narrative in general, and do we think that either of them undercut the narrative or enhance the narrative? And what is your view on life and that to supplement that? So in the movie, they run, as Kieran mentioned, they run out of gas. They see this Lovecraftian beast with the tentacles, and basically, with everything they've been through, they're at the end of their rope. They only have 4 bullets left. and they all make a group decision that they're going to end it. And then Thomas Jane is going to be the one left over. He's going to go out of the car and attempt to be basically eaten by whatever is in the mist. So he does it. That is inclusive of Dale from The Walking Dead. That is inclusive of what's her name? Francis Conroy. No, it's not Francis Conroy. It's
I don't know about Adrian from Walking Dead.
Sternhagen.
Yeah, Francis Sternhagen.
Sternhagen, yeah, from Misery.
From Misery. And then you have Laurie Holden, Walking Dead,
and The Shield, and X-Files too.
Yes, and then you have his son, Billy. Oh, Billy. And so he kills all of them. And then he's going out calling, for the monster to get him, essentially. And then what happens? A tank rolls through. The mist starts to evaporate. He realizes that the troops from Project Arrowhead have rolled in and essentially are rolling back the mist. If they only had waited a minute or two later, 5 minutes, they would have been saved. That is how the movie ends. The novella ends where they do get away. They're driving through the mist. And long story short, while they're listening to the radio, the Thomas Jane character, David, hears, he thinks he hears the word Hartford over the radio, signifying some sort of potential hope. And they keep driving, and you don't find out anything more than what there's no, aside from the soldiers kind of like letting them sort of know in the grocery store, like there's no concrete evidence of what exactly happened, like the movie has, where the troops actually saved them. So that's the end of the novella. Just so we have that for our listeners and for us in general when we're talking our likes and gripes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Nikisha, let's turn it over to you to introduce our next segment.
All right, guys, let's get into it with our first segment of likes and gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
And I guess I will start because this is my first time watching this movie. But I feel like somewhere along the way, I might have seen like a Watch Mojo of like the ending. It was still a surprise when it came, but then it was like, oh wait, I kind of remember this vibe after it happened. So I was still very shocked when that ending happened, and I didn't know what happened in the novella. So it's good to have that as a reference as well. So as I always do, this is going to be a combo of likes and gripes as I just go through my notes here, because a lot of exclamations here as I was watching this movie. So first off, I like that it starts with the storm. It doesn't have like this huge thing of exposition or this huge build up into the mist. It's like it all happens within like 15 minutes of the movie. It's like, we're here, there's a storm, they're stuck in the grocery store. And so I was like, yes, I appreciate this, because the movie for me is mostly like how people are handling and reacting to what's happening. Like that's what I'm more interested in, as opposed to being interested in how the mist got how it was, like that could be a separate movie in itself, like whatever. But I was very much intrigued with the characters that were introduced, how they were all going to try and survive this together. So
that's on my likes too. The speed at which this movie gets started is definitely right on my list, and the exposition is done in pockets, and done more through character reactions than it is through like voiceover, or like, I'm going to the grocery store and we're probably going to see people I don't like that I sued last year. Like there's none of that.
Yeah. Yes. That's true, because you don't know, especially with Andre's character, you really don't know that he was like an outsider of sorts until like he's with the locals in the grocery store. Like they do reference him being like a lawyer from New York, I believe, but it was really nice to see his interaction like with the locals in the grocery store and finding that out through that, as opposed to, like you said, Brian, just other ways of exposition.
And I thought some of the camera work earlier in the movie, especially on Andre Braugher's car, where they clearly show the New York license plate, because there's locals, and so many people vacation in Maine that like there's locals and then there's people who own like summer homes up there and stuff like that. So like that's also just like you're purposefully tying in those visual cues to support what happens in dialogue and character relationships, like a couple of scenes later, which I think is really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that exchange with Andre Braugher in the amazing actor in the in R.I.P. But in that exchange of him doing the whole "you're playing a prank on me" thing, that is one of those in the novella. It didn't really work for me in the novella. I'm like, well, come on, just look at the thing and say it. But the way he delivers it on the screen, you get it, because it's like, you have this, I'm the out of towner. And the other thing that Frank Darabont said that Brower brought to the role is he added like the undertone of racism in there too, where it's like I'm not just the out of towner here, but you guys are in your small town here, and you're treating me differently because of my race as well. And he doesn't come out and say it. It's an undertone, and the way he delivers that acting performance is just incredible. And just another quick note on Andre Braugher too is that there was supposed to be a scene, exactly what you guys are talking about, you're thankful wasn't there, of the military letting the mist out of it in the very beginning of the movie. That was how that was in the script. And Andre Braugher is the one who read the script to Darabont. They had dinner together and goes, "Do you need that in the beginning? I don't think you need that." And Darabont's like, "Oh God, he's right. He's right. This is too much." and it totally sets the tone, because it creates that level of mystery to this movie.
Mystery.
Mystery.
Whoa! We did it!
All right, I landed one of them.
Wow, we just had like a real Pee Wee Herman moment there, where it was like, "Oh my God, the secret word!" We just like alarm bells going off.
Obsessed with that. Well, to keep on the Andre track, though, a gripe I did have was that he felt like he was such an important character at the beginning that I was sad that after he left, I didn't see him again. Even if to conclude that like he did die, and just like maybe seeing his body at the pharmacy, or whatever the case may be. Like I would have preferred to at least have him have an ending, because he felt like such an integral part at the beginning. Otherwise just have him be like a side, whatever, but it's him and he's a star. So like, show his body, show his dead body. He'll still be a star. You know what I mean? Like I think that it would be, more helpful to have a conclusion for him in that, as opposed to just walking in the mist. Yeah. I put, damn, all of the Walking Dead is here, ! Love it. Cause I didn't realize, like, y'all told me Andrea, is that her name in the Andrea, sorry. Yes. But then it's like Carol and Dale and like all these people. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Yes. Also, what I didn't like was the tension between Adrian and Thomas Jane, because it felt a little forced, like a movie. Oh, here's a connection to let you know that like they'll end up being together in some kind of way towards the end. Because how they were looking at each other in the grocery store, even before everything was popping off with the mist, it was just kind of like, this feels a little like forced. And he's married
with
like,
the Laurie Holden character, like the yes, Amanda.
Sorry, I'm going to call her Adrian from now on. Sorry, referencing The Walking Dead. That works. But yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And yeah, that just seemed like a little like forced to me. But I loved the creature, and I loved.
You really wouldn't have liked the forced sex scene in the novella between the two of them.
For why?
I know.
That's wild.
I don't know. That's good old Stevie King and his typewriter.
I mean, it's like I guess I understand the narrative of like everyone is about to die, do whatever, but also like you don't know what's exactly happening, so let's like put our energy and attention on figuring out like what's going on, as opposed to like sexual chemistry between people.
Priorities.
Anyway, say it again.
Priorities.
Yes. I loved the creatures, and I thought the CGI was pretty good for its time. Oh my God, thumbs up. Hi.
Why did that do that? Does mine do that?
I don't know, but it did it.
That was wild.
That was really wild. Sorry if you are on YouTube and you see that a thumbs up emoji just came up when I thumbs up, but it's not happening with anybody else. Okay, I think the practical effects are really good too. Of course, I love the spiders inside the body. I thought that was excellent. Y'all know I love gross things. So, and the legs that we talked about that were like pulled away with the rope, I loved it. I thought it was great.
It made me laugh. I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, that's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's here we are.
I love a good practical effect.
I love it. It's
with like the intestines like coming out, and then it's just like
exactly
away.
That was cool. I like that.
Yes,
that was great.
When that that exterior shot of the legs going like and the rope, but the little intestine like flutters behind it was very cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The whole storytelling through the rope is just a great bit of like classic movie monster stuff where it's you're pulling the rope and you're pulling the rope and then all of a sudden it's going and then the rope's got blood on it. It's like that's
so. I wrote down every time that Jamie said something during this movie, and one of them was like
a lot. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But one of them was like when Thomas Jane. Well, first of all, she was like, "Put on gloves before you touch the rope. You know it's gonna go through your hands." But the other one was when it goes up, like because obviously like something's like pulling him. She's like, "Oh no, he's in the air!" Like,
I just thought like it was really effective storytelling because like they have no idea what's going on and just everything that could go wrong in that situation does without you really seeing anything until the end of that scene. But like I just thought that was a really effective way to demonstrate the threat without them even seeing what the monster is, because even after all that, when you see the lower half of a body, you have no idea what actually caused that. And I thought that was just a really effective scare.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that it was very effective. There was a lot of nice like effective scares, even when they're all in the back and the person is like about to go out to fix the generator and then gets like sucked in with all this stuff. I thought that was good. But also in that very same thing, I was like, nobody heard all that commotion in the front. Like this grocery store is not that big. And for them to not have heard what was happening, I was like, this is a huge gripe. Like what? People are yelling and screaming.
I have a major gripe with that entire scene because I will hold my tongue until it is my turn, but I really don't appreciate how like the main character is like trying to say like I heard something weird and everyone's like whatever and like insulting him, and then they go through this whole thing and then the one guy's like, well, how was I supposed to know what you meant? Like he told you. And I find that so frustrating. And then nobody else seemingly hears any screaming or like banging around or anything. I just thought that was absurd.
It's the food house. I don't know what the acoustics are like in the food house. But so if we're talking about that scene specifically, and I'll get to my gripes as well, but while we're like just kind of in it there, I think that's one of the moments where character relationships don't work without context. I think that when he's like, don't yell at me, college boy, like you're a famous artist and all that, like to me that was very silly and like stereotypical, like hickey. That doesn't work for me. In concept, I think the idea that there is the locals versus the tourists, you have that kind of generalization. Then within the locals, you have like more educated, more like blue collar, more creative type, more like, and you get that like aspect of things. And obviously that's what that's trying to demonstrate, because as things get a little bit more like science and religion, and it breaks down into even more sex, like it keeps breaking down and breaking down. In concept, I love that. I think this movie displays that really well. But in those character moments, I think that without certain amounts of context, those come off as funny and silly and are more effective when thinking back, but in the moment come off as stereotypical, unlayered characters.
Yeah. And you know, Brian, you kind of, that was one of my main likes for this one too, is that a lot of times these types of movies tends to be good guys versus bad guys, or the people who know the truth versus people who are doubting them. And it's just, what, you know, should we stay or should we go? And that's it. This one they keep changing sides and changing issues in this movie, and they're disagreeing, but now they're like for instance, Thomas Jane says we have to stay, but later on in the movie he's like we have to go. So it shows that there's complex reactions to all of these things, and then like when you go to the layers in the characterization of you do have your locals and your tourists, and then you do have the rich and the poor. You do have the old and the young. You do have the military guys in the. There's a lot of different dynamics in this thing, and it makes for an interesting watch and an interesting rewatch because you can get into these dynamics each time you see this film. I don't know how rewatchable the ending is, but we'll
Yes.
Sure.
For sure. Well, just speaking on dynamics, another thing that was a little bit of a gripe for me where sometimes I felt like people were moving a little bit too slow in their reactions towards things and making decisions, especially when the night scene happens and they're trying to deal with like the monsters, and it's like clear that they're attracted to light, but people are turning on more lights. And I'm like, this is not a townsperson versus an out of towner or whatever. This is kind of like common knowledge that I feel like adults should know, as far as like, you see people are turning off these lights, like why are you lighting more lights? But the dynamic with the church lady was interesting because I was equally annoyed as well as like I understood her purpose in it, especially with like the mob mentality. And also this is a direct reflection of my church background, and so I was absolutely uncomfortable at everything that she was saying. So like message received with that. And it was also interesting too though, because they pinned her as a quote unquote like crazy lady, right? And I feel like that wasn't the right term to use for her, because for me it seems like if you're talking about a crazy woman who's out of her mind, who's like saying random things, who is not conscious of what's happening and stuff like that, she is very aware of what's going on and what's happening. She just has a very, very deep like religious belief. So like I don't think that they calling her like a crazy woman was I guess as powerful, or for lack of a better word.
Because she felt and again, I don't know if it's the script or the performance by an Oscar-winning actress. Not for this. But my question there is, and Jamie and I talked, and I'll let Jamie talk about that and her gripes a little bit, but like defining her as a crazy person is there's a lot to unpack here, but I don't know if that's a judgment on the writer's part, on the screenwriter's part, where we're judging that character for the audience. I don't know if that's just the individual's opinion of that character. I also don't know if that was done on purpose to set your expectations as a viewer to a certain level, because she's actually way more calculating. The moment that roach fly, thing doesn't attack her, obviously she's calm, so it leaves her alone, but like she sees it as something else because she has that belief. So I think that in my personal opinion, the screenplay is super basic about her. I think she's a very stereotypical religious character, and Marcia Gay Harden brings something more to that. But at the end of the day, I think that it's really just a piece, that a chess piece that you need to have in a movie like this, a religious chess piece that you're putting into play, and obviously that builds over the course of the movie as people start to turn towards that. But I do think that just in general, the character really does come off as just a pawn played by a very good actress, and I wish that character had way more layers. I think that would have been a much more interesting, that character would have been way more interesting, as opposed to like, I'm just not supposed to like her because she's a crazy person. There's a lot of stuff that I'm still struggling with in my head about that character on this rewatch.
They do have the one scene with her and Amanda where they're kind of off to the side, and that grounds her a little bit, because on the page in the book she's a very bombastic character too. I think she's like she owns a shop with I don't remember exactly how they fill her out in the book, but it's all very larger than life type of stuff, which is tough to bring to the screen. And I thought that little exchange with her and Amanda there, where you just kind of got to see them talking away from it, a little bit about life outside of here, and you got to get a little bit of humanity out of her. But I would have liked more too, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I go back and forth too, Brian, with her because I liked that her purpose led to mob mentality. Like I
Yes,
like
totally.
how
Evil
her
dies
stuff,
tonight.
yeah. But
Evil dies tonight.
You can't get
Evil
away
dies
from
tonight.
Halloween. Oh man.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, so like her purpose, but like how we get to, I guess that like the inner workings of her herself, it was just kind of like left some things for the,
Totally.
imagination. Last couple of things. Damn, what a tough decision with the gun and all the stuff. And I was like, shit, this is a heavy movie. I was not expecting this ending. That is wild and crazy. And I don't know if I could have made that decision. So it's just, it was just an interesting thing that that's where the movie went. I think I don't know if I would have liked the book ending better or not. I don't know. I would have to see how it would have been played out if the movie did the book ending to see if I actually would have enjoyed it. But other than that, it was a really fun watch. Like I said, I love that everyone from The Walking Dead was in it. I love the practical effects. I loved I thought the CGI was really good for the time. And I liked the context, even though there were some holes in it for me. I really just did enjoy watching a movie about people trying to survive like the unknown. Because I feel like just watching how people are going to respond to the unknown is interesting enough for me to be invested, whether or not they make the right decision or whether or not like things are interconnected. It was so just a fun first watch. Yeah, Kieran, please give us your likes and gripes.
Yeah, so I'm going to start the first I'm going to start here with, and I have my my 4K edition here, the mist that I got for this here, 4 discs.
Nice.
And on this, it has a black and white version of this film. And
Cool.
I cannot emphasize more. If anyone has the access to watch it, watch the black and white version. It is leaps and bounds a better experience. In mood, in vibe. Some of the CGI things that are a little bit 2000s-y get corrected with the black and white, like the tentacles and whatnot. I kind of, I watched Parasite in black and white, and to me, it didn't really bring too much to it. I know there's a black and white version of Bong Joon-ho's Parasite also. Didn't do much. And the color is very vibrant in that film. But man, it was so clear right in the storm in the beginning and like the wreckage of the storm. I'm like, ooh, this is something. So if anyone has the ability to go, I don't know that you can stream it anywhere, but it is on the I think the DVD versions and the Blu-ray versions. So that's right out of the gate. I wouldn't want to watch this movie in color again after seeing it in black and white. That's how cool of an experience it was.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah, I can. This has like a universal monster movie vibe to it. I'm sure in black and white that really pops even more. That's super cool.
And also like a Twilight Zone vibe to it also.
Yeah.
So you kind of feel like you're watching a long Twilight Zone episode. And that goes into the ending, which is very Twilight Zone. In that. And I do appreciate a big swing, and I do think the ending works for what he was trying to do with this film. And I like kind of the big Twilight Zone finish there. I just have so many nitpicks with what their game plan was. Like, what are they doing? Like, they're just driving into this, just driving.
Totally.
And, taking pictures of the big walking camel or what, like what, what are we
like
doing
a safari
here?
ride?
Like, can we find a hotel? Can we find like a somebody's got to have a closed door in a house.
Gas stations still work. You know what I mean? Like,
totally. Tanks. We're just, what is he's just got the gun. He's like, well, we're just going to drive until I get to use this gun.
Totally.
I don't, and I just don't, I would be like, listen, Thomas Jane, you want to do your little, murder suicide thing in here? That's fine. I'm getting out of the car and I'm going to go figure something out. If I got to get eaten by a pterodactyl, I got to get eaten by a pterodactyl.
Totally.
Right? I'm not taking a bullet to the head from Thomas Jane. All right. So that And it's like, it's one of those, is you have to realize you're watching a allegorical horror film or whatever, and you put the nitpicks aside. But I just, every time I see the ending, I'm like, come on, what's the plan on paper here, fellas? So that kills me. It's funny, Nikisha, one of your gripes was actually one of my likes in the turning on and off of the lights.
The lights, yeah.
Because to me, it just showed how hard it is to wrangle logic within a chaotic crew like this. You know, if it's
fair.
like 6 of you, all right, they're coming to the light, we stop. But there's like 50 plus people in this thing, and all right, we figured out that they're attracted to the light. There's always some idiot in the back like, we need to see what's going on, and he's turning lights on. So I just kind of thought there was a nice little touch of chaos in it. Of course, I'm screaming at the TV, what are you turning the lights on, you idiot? You know?
Yeah.
So I fell right in between you two. I originally wrote it in my gripes, and then Toby Jones has that line where he like figures it out, and then somebody says, I'm like, but they're turning the lights on the back, tell them to turn it off. And then like, I thought that the dialogue that was added to that chaos clearly stated the miscommunication that was a foreshadowing for like what else was to come. So it was actually a like and a gripe for me, because like, it's funny that you both said that, and I felt like right in between. That's totally nailed it.
Yeah.
A like for me, and I love a film that takes place in like one setting, and a bevy of different things happen within that setting. They come at night kind of thing, it's nighttime. Geez, the bugs are coming again. There's always something different's always happening. The plot's always moving. The story's always moving, but we're staying in the same place. So I think that's always like a fun experience, and particularly in the horror genre. Love the character work, the ensemble character work in this thing. It was really well cast. It was a mix of, you have kind of your more well-known people than the people that he's used to working with. You see a lot of people who are on Shawshank, who are on Walking Dead, and then a lot of local actors. So like Carol on The Walking Dead was just a local actor, and she blew everyone away with that scene of her walking out. And I think because of that, he probably cast her as one of the main people on the Walking Dead. I know she's not a very popular character on The Walking Dead, right?
Yes.
I think both.
She goes back and forth. She's the pendulum.
Yeah.
Right. And Laurie Holden wasn't very popular on that show either. I remember
hated her.
Yeah,
Laurie Holden was not popular on that show for sure.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's great on The Shield, and she's good in X-Files too. She's in like earlier seasons of X-Files as like one of Mulder's informants. But I think she's pretty good in this film too. So, but I remember her annoying the hell out of me on Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The CGI tentacles were a little bit, and I like kind of the practical effects they do. But outside of that, like, the bugs and the flying birds and all the stuff they see outside, like the crab that stuff's all done pretty well. I think it's the same crew that did Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth that did the effects on this one. So,
nice.
And the black and white really kind of smooths that over and makes that a little more agreeable.
Well, the character design of those like flying bugs is nuts.
Yeah.
Like when it's got like weird teeth and a face and a smile, like totally like feels very Del Toro like that crew.
Yes.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Oh man, when it bites the girl in the neck and she starts like blood.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Very Willy Wonka.
That was the sixth child that died.
Yeah.
In Willy Wonka.
My daughter's a blueberry.
Yes.
Yeah, listen, I really like this film. I do. I kind of like it every time I see it. I like it more and more. That being said, I don't watch it that often because the ending is a lot to stomach. So, but yeah, this is one that I try to go back to when I can. And there are nitpicks here and there that kind of drive me a little nuts while I'm watching it, but I can always get past that stuff.
Yeah,
and Marcia Gay Harden is a force to be reckoned with in this movie, literally.
Absolutely. Even though I was like so happy that when they shot her and died,
Ugh.
which I also forgot the quote that I loved after she got shot and they're trying to get to the car. And the guy was like, I wouldn't have killed her under any other circumstance. And Thomas was like, yeah, that's why I said thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a crowd erupts moment there. In that one.
Yes, that's a good quote. That's very Mad Men like you never say thank you. That's what the money is for.
Yes. Love it. Obsessed with it. All right, Brian or Jamie, would you like to go next with your likes and gripes?
Go for it, Jamie.
I will go. So I have seen this movie once before. I think I saw it when it came out, and then I was good. I was okay if I did not watch this movie again. Uh, Not because I hate this movie, but again, I've mentioned this many times on the podcast. I don't like sad endings.
That's fair.
I want an alternate reality outside of our own where everything is wonderful. And like meanwhile I'm having like an existential crisis watching this movie. So when I heard that this was the movie that you picked, Kieran, I was like, oh God, like literally this is the only reason I would ever watch this movie ever again. So thank you for having me revisit this. I I just yeah, really the ending has stuck with me ever since I watched this movie. And so I know everything. I didn't remember everything that happened, but I just know it's like all building up to this like really devastating ending. So it's like, okay, like let's get back into this world and see kind of what else is happening that leads them to making that decision to see if it makes sense and like is justifiable despite it being so upsetting and devastating. So I think that I have very mixed feelings about the character development, kind of like what Brian was saying. Like sometimes I feel like it really lands and makes sense and is believable, especially between like the townies and like the tourists and or locals and the tourists. That there's like this tension and animosity between like people who are seemingly more educated and less so. But there's these other interactions that I just have a really hard time believing them to be real. And I think part of that is like sometimes the characters come across to me as very one note, and I find it like disingenuous and sometimes boring because I'm just like, this isn't how humans act. Or maybe I'm just so frustrated at like the personality that like I just have a really hard time with it. So it's like revisiting the Marcia Gay Harden character is so tough. It's so tough to sit with her. It's like deeply uncomfortable, but there are these moments where it just feels super one note. And then I think as it evolves, as she gains more power, I find her character like, I mean, she's terrible, but like a little bit more believable. There's like not enough, I feel like, in the first half that almost I don't think that anything she's doing in particular makes it believable for her to gain the following. I feel like it's just the coincidence of everything that's happening. And like there are moments where I think she times what she says more effectively as it goes on that like makes her character even more insidious and manipulative. But in the beginning it just feels super one note with like it's the end of times. It's like excuse, ma'am, I'm just trying to bag my groceries and get out of here. It just like it just seems so outlandish and like bizarre. And so it's interesting that like I feel like in the beginning her character's super flat and then she kind of like grows a little bit. But yeah, it's also like very hard for me to just like I'm not interacting with this character, but just being in the presence of this character that I detest so much. It's very hard for me to like sit with it. So I'm like trying to separate, like, I know it makes me personally uncomfortable and I'm not going to like be mad at the movie for that. But I will say that it's not the type of thing that I enjoy sitting through. It's not fun.
But also, Jamie said something to me during the movie that I hope I can share is that Marcia Gay Harden typically plays more upper crust type characters. She usually plays someone who is wildly educated. She's usually playing the grounding source, or like, you know, to the crazy character in the movie, or she's playing like the motherly character who is a little bit more like buttoned up and like more proper and whatnot. So while she's a powerhouse of an actress, Jamie made the point of like, by casting Marcia Gay Harden, you're setting weird expectations for what this character is supposed to be. So
Yeah. It's very weird. There's like this weird tension in my head of who I'm expecting, like how I'm expecting her to act based on like not historical context for this character or this movie, but based on historical context for other characters that she has played in other things. And so it's like, it's kind of like the opposite of what we've talked about, where, you know, they cast certain actors in like villain roles, and we know that they're the villain only because they're like top billing in the movie, but it's not normally what they would play. But for this, I feel like it almost undercuts it, because I'm like, I don't believe, I like have an even harder time believing that this character is real, because of who is playing her. I feel like there's something about the actual casting that makes it harder to like digest and stomach her, because I don't believe that she would play this person. It's such a silly thing, but that's just, I don't know. I'm like, no, she would actually play the Andre Braugher character in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, that's more believable to me.
The New York lawyer.
Yes, 1,000%. That's who I'm expecting her to play as. And it's like, I know I have to like leave my own expectations at the door, but I just found it really hard to do that with her in particular, even though I think she's like effective at being this like villainous, awful person. But it just like sits really weird with me, because those aren't the characters that I ever expect her to play. Maybe with the exception of Flubber. Because I forgot that she's in that movie. But aside from that, I mean, she's still a wonderful character in Flubber. But yeah, it's just
she gets done dirty in Flubber.
She really does. Flubber is a really upsetting movie.
Yeah.
I have not revisited that, but now I will. Just so I
Oh,
can
you
see.
should. We revisited like last year or something like that, and like,
Wow.
I think you need to revisit Flubber.
It is a wild. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Wait, mild side note. She the character that he's supposed to get married, and to her.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm with you now. I'm with you now. Great.
Yeah.
Got it.
The way he treats her is unacceptable. Anyway,
awful.
this is not The Mist, not Flubber. Good point.
Not about Flubber.
Maybe Flubber is like a prequel to The Mist. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Accidentally opened the portal.
Yeah,
Maybe.
they say the scientist. Something went wrong with the scientist, and you know, maybe the Flubber is what came out of another.
That's why
dimension.
she turned to God, because science done her dirty.
Robin Williams, her true love didn't connect.
Yeah.
And then now she's
right.
Now she's preaching at supermarkets. The food house.
I will say I like the foreshadowing in the beginning, when they see all of the like military vehicles driving in the opposite direction. I liked the mist on the water, but it wasn't moving particularly quickly. And then once they were in the supermarket, it was like bam, like it just like rolled in very fast. And that was the start of where I had a problem with the CGI. For me, it was like very, very bad. It was like distractibly bad. So like when the mist came in really fast, I was like, it just looks like a big like fart cloud that comes in, and like it was just very distracting. And then and then I had a huge problem with the tentacles. The tentacles look very fake. I think the thing that saves the tentacles is when they rip when they're in the back with the generator scene.
Yes.
And the Shermanator is getting attacked, when they're like ripping the chunks of his flesh off of him, that like brought me back in. That like something disgusting needed to happen to him to like make the connection between the CGI and the character, aside from just the pulling. So like that I think helped, and like adding gore to that scene made it more believable.
Sure.
I also really hated when they like they chopped off the piece of the tentacle and then they go back and revisit it and they poke it and then it just like disintegrates into water. Like
It's
that
mist.
was really weird. No, it wasn't. It didn't turn into mist. It literally turned into water.
Yeah, I know.
It was
Mist
a
is
puddle.
water. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
it was a puddle on the ground.
Yeah. No, I totally.
Which is why I'm like, man, maybe we should have watched this in black and white because I'm very curious about like how the tentacles and like that scene looks, just like feeling more real and like just not being distracted by kind of like the fakeness of it again, which is why I really like practical effects because it just helps like add to the scares and the gore and it's not to say that like I think that this movie is scary, but it's just like that those moments kind of took away from me and made it harder to like not laugh when things were happening.
Yeah. So one of my gripes about exactly what you said is if the tentacle is going to disappear, there is no point of the tentacle disappearing if people don't try and go back there and it's not there anymore. I like the tentacle disappearing only matters if someone's like, let me see, and it's not there. You know what I mean? Like to me it was like it kind
That's
of like
what I thought was
disappearing.
going to happen because I forgot what happened originally, but the fact that they was still there and then it was like well, and then they're just like that's weird, but like it doesn't matter at that point because they saw it and like verified that some part of what he said is truth. But yeah, but then you never see the tentacles ever again. Then we've moved on to flying locust bugs, bigger like pterodactyl things. Those ones were okay. The spiders looked wildly fake to me, like the really tiny ones that like burst out of the body. They were also gross because like I don't like spiders, but like they just looked like fake spiders.
But look, that's like the thing of nightmares though. It's like that when you go to sleep and have a nightmare, it's tiny little like
millions of tiny
spiders just like pouring like being on top of you. Like that's it, and I guess like even though it definitely is all like CGI to the nth degree, it's still just like so unsettling. That's those tiny little creepy crawlies.
Again, a practical effect that I think sells that scene is the right before that, the body that we learn is like a cocoon to all the spiders. Seeing it starting to convulse and move, you're like, oh, something disgusting is about to come out of this person, and like I like get away. Like you're like cowering in fear. But then I was like, oh, but the spiders look silly. But I was like, I'm still grossed out in general by like this whole scene of stuff that's happening. I did like. Even if I don't even know what those other, were they spider? They were like then bigger insects crawling on the ground that were spitting the like venomous.
Like big boy spiders. Big boy.
I guess they were spiders. The venom stuff I thought was really cool too.
Yeah.
And like watching them all like evade
like lasers,
the little things. Yeah, I really like that part. And then I didn't like the big boy at the end, like the giant creature. I just was like, I kind of was like at that point, like, what's the point of? I feel
just
like that
kill
was
yourselves already.
Well, that for me, that was a problem of you're showing me too much. I wish that I wish it was even bigger. I wish it was just legs. I wish they didn't show like the whole creature with like it has legs, it has tentacles, it has like whatever. It's like there's too much going on. I like the less is more approach. Just show me big ass legs and nothing else. And like not even like the mist is so big you can't even see the whole body. You just see big legs. Like that's terrifying to me.
I think I think you said big ass legs.
Big
just
ass,
give me big ass legs.
Big legs. No, I want big ass and big legs, and that's
both. Got it. Okay.
And then, but yeah, so I had like mixed feelings on like the creatures and the CGI of it all. But yeah, sometimes it was effective and sometimes it wasn't. I think like kind of seeing things in the mist again like was helpful because if you didn't see the whole thing, I like that more where it's like still mysterious and you can't like get the full picture of it.
The
But yeah,
CGI, the CGI is very 2007, and that
Oh,
era
yeah.
of movies, there was a lot of like, look at this shiny new toy we have, and like they didn't
Mm.
like stop to think that, you know, in a matter of just a few years, that toy is not going to be very shiny at all. It's going to
So
be, you know, dated.
here's my
Yeah.
pitch. Here's my pitch for CGI to movie studios. I know that all the main movie studios listen to this podcast, so here's my pitch for all of them. My pitch for all of the major studios is you put a section of your budget towards better CGI in a couple of years. You re-release movies with better CGI. However, if your movie doesn't do well and no one gives a fuck about it, then you roll that over to another movie. So, like The Mist, this movie may actually be more effective if they just like cleaned up the CGI like and made it a little bit better. And I'm not talking about like Snyder cutting it where like you're just like recutting the movie. I'm talking about literally just like cleaning up the CGI, the all of that stuff. That's my pitch to movie studios. Is that feasible? No, probably not. Is it worth even talking about? No, but like I think there's something there. All you studios heads that
I
are
agree.
listening to Talking Horror, you know, I think this is what you should do.
Somewhere George
That's why-
Lucas just sat up in his bed like, oh, they want me
Exactly.
again. They need
Right.
me.
Yeah, George Lucas and Spielberg are just like, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Get the walkie-talkies. Get the
Yeah,
walkie-talkies.
yeah, exactly.
Oh
Yeah,
my
like
God.
yeah. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to go on a tangent of what I just Googled about CGI in 2007. But yeah, I think this movie is scary. I have some problems with the characters. Again, I really hate that conversation after the Shermanator has been taken away and they're just like, no, you should have really explained what you meant. Like, there's a lot of miscommunications that happen. And like, yes, some of that is grounded in reality where like there's a crisis and people aren't really able to communicate effectively. But I think there's other things where like when they don't yet know quite what's going on, there is still time to be able to like talk effectively. And I just don't always feel like people are using critical thinking skills in this situation. And again, sometimes when a crisis is happening, it is a lot harder to like access that part of your brain because you are in shock and overwhelmed. But like there are definitely moments where people are not yet at that point and they're just refusing to kind of like consider all possibilities. And I think that also gets into the problem of like, you know, nowadays when people in movies are like, I think it's zombies, you have that like conversation where it's like zombies aren't real, and it's like
I hate that.
Exactly, it's annoying. So it's like, what is the balance between like suspending your disbelief in something when someone is like coming to you and being like, this is what I saw, you can take it or leave it, but like obviously there's an emergency, so like let's react as if this is an emergency versus
That's
just
great.
dismissing
Mhm.
it outright and being like,
Yes.
oh, you're a dummy trying to get one over on me, which happens both with the like hick townies and happens with the smart lawyer from New York. It's like both
Yes.
sides are like, we don't want to believe you. So it's clear that it doesn't matter what level of education you have. It's just about like people refusing to like, I don't know, like want to listen to people or like use those critical thinking skills or connect with other people on like a human, like is it a lack of empathy and compassion that is causing these miscommunications? I don't know, but I find it very frustrating in movies. So that's what that makes me think of when it comes to this situation.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think that is a meta problem with movies. The more a
Yes.
type of movie becomes saturated, like let's take zombies for example, the more that type of genre gets saturated, the more you're used to the exposition and the more the first third of the movie is something you've seen before, where it's like, there are zombies, no there aren't. Like you have to be, the more that there is something of a genre, the more clever you have to be in your screenwriting to not bore the audience with something that you've seen before. I think one of the best, this is going to sound wild, but I think one of the best, I think Zombieland does it really
I
well.
knew you were going to go there, yeah.
I also think that Civil War from the MCU introduces Spider-Man because we're all just sick of Uncle Ben at that point. So we didn't have to relive Uncle Ben. We just got Spider-Man. Like you were able to incorporate. I mean, I know that's different because you're like that's like a backdoor pilot, if you will. But like Zombieland's a good one. There are some other. Honestly, Walking Dead is a good one because he wakes up from the coma and you don't have to go through like, oh no, what's happening? Like he's figuring out because we're through that, but like we know that that exists in real time.
Yeah, I think it's handled really well in Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later too. I don't know if that's
sure.
Where
That's a good one.
The crisis in the very beginning on a small stature, and then we just get Cillian Murphy waking up, and like, where did London go? You know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I guess that there's. Oh, sorry, Nikisha, you go.
No. I was just gonna say the same could be said about like slasher movies when everyone is like, "Oh, what's happening?" Blah blah blah, and then you have like someone not believing, and then that person getting killed, and then everyone believes a thing, and then now we're trying to run away from what's happening, like that kind of mentality. But sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was just gonna say like I understand that like part of what I think. What I imagine people like about The Mist is like the mysterious element of it. And so like I feel like for me, there's less of a balance, but maybe for other people there is the balance between like nobody really knows what's going on. It is like, it's super unknown and uncertain. And so you're going to have the people who are really resistant to believing like, you know, whatever things people are throwing out there. But I just, one of my biggest movie gripes is just miscommunications. And so I have a harder time when it's like we could be talking through this a little bit more effectively, but it just doesn't seem like these characters are willing to, or like they're just not allowed to for whatever reason. And so like this is why this is happening. And it bothers me because it's like there's so many things that then feel like they're escalating, when if we just like slow down and take a beat, we could probably figure this out in an effective conversation. But like, so that's my own gripe that I like continue to find in movies, that I feel like that's probably why this movie really frustrates me, is there's just a lot of miscommunications that continue to spiral and like blow up and get more out of control.
Noted. So Jamie, whenever there is a zombie apocalypse, I will come to you and say, Jamie, there's an emergency. Come with me, as opposed to just trying to explain zombies, and then you'll come with me and we'll be safe.
And I'm just going to start turning the lights on and off in the background.
Right. Nikisha, if you no, we've already decided collectively as a podcast, if one of us is possessed, we immediately believe it. No questions asked. You don't have to prove anything to me. You said the P word. I'm in. Like, let's get the holy water.
And I'm calling the exorcist
first. Chapstick first.
Oh, and chapstick. Exorcist.
All possessed people in movies have chapped lips, and we need to make sure that you get your chapstick, your
chapstick, your chapstick, and your holy water.
Because we have to document it, so you need to look good in the
exactly.
Thing, so we will get your.
Yeah, I'm done.
All right, I'll go through mine very quickly. I think that the opening is really wonderful, like you all said, but something that we hadn't talked about yet is that the music at the beginning of the movie is this old timey jazz that is trying to kind of set up this Norman Rockwell vibes. And I think that sets you in a very interesting place because, you know, Maine, this like beautiful vacation land, like everything is great. Like families are wonderful. And you even start with this family unit who like seems very much in love. Like, you know, you can imagine their Thanksgivings. Like I think that was super, super cool. I also like the title card. I like the family looking out the window at the mist, and the mist. Like I think horror movies better than any genre nail title cards.
Yeah.
The New York plates I mentioned, payphone. I haven't seen one of those in a while.
Sure.
I think that this movie, I'm in a lot of places, specifically the Carol moment at the beginning where she's looking for her kids. It allows for questions to ask it allows for characters to ask unreasonable questions when she's saying like, will you come with me? Will you come with me? Like that was not fair of her to ask, but it was super believable and justifiable for her in that moment. So like, I think that this movie more than does a great job of like trying to see what would this type of person do in this moment. Like, and I don't think it works all the time. Like I think sometimes it characters are in a place, both the way they're presented to us and mentally, to talk something out a little bit more than not. But in that scenario, I thought that was really well done and kind of set our expectations for, you know, who some of these people are and all of that. I also think that the gore in the back room of Shermanator was great. I did not know that dog food would be such a big side character in this film. You know, the tentacles rip open the dog food. They use the dog food against the windows. There's a lot of dog food in this movie. I wrote Carol's always crying about her kids. I think this movie, we'll talk about the ending. I think this movie does a good job of foreshadowing the ending in general. The idea of that the religion, they want to like sacrifice the boy. He makes the promise to his dad. I counted bullets this time just to make sure that everything was accurate. Because you know that's what you do.
They literally give you Chekhov's gun there in the first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they count it down. Like he literally says, like, we only have 10 bullets left. Like it felt like I like that. I needed like a bullet counter. Yeah.
Sorry, to your point though, did they just have another gun? Because like after, did they fully use the 10 bullets? And then like when they shoot the church lady, I was like, where did I thought you were out of bullets. Like,
no,
what
he had 10 rounds left. He fired 4 or 5 in the pharmacy.
With
then
the spiders, okay.
Yeah, and then I forget at some point he says I have 10 rounds left. I think it's in the pharmacy. Then he uses them in the pharmacy. He uses them a couple of times to kill the pterodactyl. Then he uses 2 rounds or 2 bullets to kill her. He may use it outside again, and then he drops it on the car. So I think it ends up working out. I did lose track, but I'm gonna. That seems like something Frankie Boy would count and make sure that he did accurately.
Yes.
I love how much they say the mist in this movie. Jamie and I always will look at each other during a movie when like they say the title, like be like, and oh, has anyone been to? Have you seen The Mist? Like this movie does it so. They stop saying The Mist in the second half, but in the first half they say it so much, and I fucking love it. I really liked the little moments in this movie, like, and even like when Amanda is going to stomp on the creature and she slips a little bit, like little stuff like that makes the CGI more believable. And I thought that some of that stuff was really good. Some really great scary moments. I think the rope is one of my favorite moments in this whole movie, as we talked about. I like the chaos of the lights on and off with the bugs. The bug design is fucking insane. I thought that Darabont's use of cameras in this is impeccable, specifically when they're going to the pharmacy and they're literally going in and out of the mist, and he lingers on them disappearing and then appearing again somewhere else. I thought that was really effective, especially because that's the first time our main characters go out there, and I think that was a really, really effective camera work. Jamie shh a lot at the screen when people were screaming and inappropriate times, specifically when he's trying to grab the gun on the hood and they're all screaming like, don't do it. It's like, if you would shut the fuck up, there would be no problem. There would be no problem here. Like, do we not learn anything in the hour and a half? Do we not learn that when characters don't learn things they should have learned, like, because there are clear situations. I know I'm going into gripe territory, but like what I loved about it was Jamie was shushing them.
They were right though, because they would have lived if they didn't get the gun.
Absolutely. And when actually, Kieran, spectacular segue. My final thing is the little decisions. The little decision that, like, to grab the gun, the decision to shoot her twice. All of these little decisions kind of lead to the end of the movie. And I think that narratively or plot, another thumbs up. I don't know why that happened. I think that it works from a plot point perspective, but we'll talk narratively in general. Gripes, CGI, we talked about that. These characters are stereotypical in places. We talked about that. Lots of defensive comments without context. We talked about that. Lots of over-explaining people's motives. It doesn't leave much to the audience in terms of like the they kind of tell you what's going to happen, which is interesting in one way, where like this is what's going to happen with the religion. People are going to end up moving there the more that we can't get out, and so we're preparing for that. I would have liked a little bit to be left to like the audience seeing how all these pieces are moving into place, but that's a me pet peeve, not a movie pet peeve, I would say. I don't like to be explained a lot of things. I like to figure it out on my own, but like that is 100% a me thing. I think that I agree with Jamie about Marcia Gay Harden in some respects. The young lovers, happens way too late into the movie for us to care about their story. Honestly, that you either do that first during the exposition. It feels like a scene was cut earlier and they reshot that scene between them in the back room. Anyway, that whole storyline was a little bit too like Love Actually, like this is their storyline and this is their storyline. And so I could have dealt without that, without the emotional impact. Her just being bit and swelling up was totally enough there. Every time they said Billy, I thought of the cable guy. Oh, Billy, I don't know why. And then it had very like Carl vibes from Walking Dead. I don't know. I never felt fully satisfied from this rewatch, and I don't know why. We could talk about that. It may just be the nitpicks that Kieran was talking about. I think I had trouble leaving them behind this time. I wish I'd watched it in the black and white. I think that would have changed my watch through on this one. And when I'm ready to watch this again, I'm definitely going to do that. The pacing post monster attack, like pterodactyl scene before they go to the pharmacy, is really slow. I think Darabont slows it down a little bit too much because half of the movie is still left, and those couple of moments, even though the conversations were interesting, I don't know what it was, but it felt too slowed down for me. This is only me. I did not like the fade to black passing time transition.
Oh yeah, that was super weird.
I think there's something more clever and interesting to do there that felt very melodramatic, and that didn't work for me. I thought that once they started talking about religion versus science and the abortion and stuff like that, that's when there were too many hats in the ring. That's when the movie started to go a different direction. That I didn't mind them passing Sam Witwer around and stabbing him and that's fine. That's mob mentality. But the second that you really start talking about abortion and all of that, I feel like you're ripping open something else that this movie clearly wanted to say, but narratively then just puts too many ideas into the pot, in my personal opinion. There would have been way more blood in the car at the end. With that short range, like there would have been, like, honestly, like the movie's called The Mist because there's only a misting of blood in the car at the end. It should have been a deluge of it. And then to be totally honest, I don't think that Thomas Jane sells the moment at the end as an actor. He's doing this physical thing, but to me there's no emotion behind it. To me it comes off as I'm screaming, this is sad, but like there's something that to me doesn't connect to the fact that he just murdered these people and he just found out that like something doesn't work for me there. The moment is effective, but his acting isn't as effective as I thought it would, as I remembered it. And this isn't Maine because Maine has vanity plates all the place, and there are no vanity plates in this movie. If you go to Maine, it's like $60 at the DMV to do a vanity plate. Everyone has a vanity plate in Maine.
Oh
it's
my God.
Crazy.
Yeah,
and there are no
truly.
vanity plates in this. And then my biggest interest, I don't know if this is a pet peeve or a gripe, I don't know. This time, watching this movie, knowing The Walking Dead, felt like watching Wes Craven's new Nightmare, knowing that Scream exists. This feels like a test run for what he did better in season 1 of The Walking Dead, in my personal opinion. So that's not fair. That's not fair because this is a standalone and that's a standalone. But he's doing very similar things with relationships in a world in which you don't really know what the end is going to be like. and I think that this was kind of him like figuring it out. He probably, I don't know the history of it. He probably got that job based on the fact that he was able to manage all of these interesting themes together and all of that. But that's kind of what it feels like a little bit on this rewatch to me. But
A weird
I guess
connection
my
to your analogy there. Sorry to interrupt. Is
Yeah, no,
Frank
go.
Frank Darabont wrote Dream Warriors.
Yes. No,
Friday the
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I saw that.
Nightmare on Elm
Yes,
Street.
that's right. That's right. Yes. That's so interesting.
Wow. Okay.
But I have a question for the group before we get into brains. Is this movie forgettable without the ending? Does
That's such
the
a great
ending
question.
of this movie elevate this to a different level than it would if they did drive off, or if it wasn't as, devastating as an ending?
I think the answer is yes. But I think that being a Stephen King property keeps it alive in the lexicon a little bit, so I don't think it'd go completely forgotten.
Sure.
But this is remembered for that big swing ending, which is kind of what my point before, whether I like the ending or not. I appreciate the swing, and it connects. It connects in the history of horror because of it.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely bumped up my ratings on the Shakes because of the
Sure.
ending. Because I will never forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree too. Even thinking about like other things that stand out more contemporary, like regarding mob mentality stuff. Like you referenced the new Halloween, and like that's something that I think stays in my brain because of like similar stuff, but I don't know if just that part would have stayed in my brain as opposed to like spoilers for Halloween 2 that like then Michael Myers comes and like destroys the mob. So like that's why that movie, I remember that. So it's like maybe it is about the ending that like makes it more meaningful, because like mob mentality is a theme in a lot of different things, but does it have the same staying power? I don't know.
So my second question for the group is, and I might be botching this question, so just take it for what you see the question as. Does this ending undercut what this movie is trying to say? Does the ending make sense for what these characters have gone through? And maybe more importantly, um, does what is this movie trying to say with the ending? Like, is it trying to say like be patient? Is it trying to say that like there is no God, there is no not God, there are only choices that you make? Like, what to you, what is this movie actually trying to say with these characters? Because Stephen King is known to end his most high percent of his stuff with hope. And they changed this to not be about that. Like, what does the ending mean to you, and what do you think it's trying to say, and does it undercut what the movie is trying to do?
That's a great question. I'll speak just from the most layman of terms and not from an intellectual standpoint at all. The ending for me just felt like Kieran was saying, just like a swing just to shock the audience. Like, I don't think that it really undercut what was happening before. I feel like it didn't make sense, like we had already mentioned, with them not trying to look for a gas station or whatever, whatever. But I don't think that it undercut anything that happened before it. I just think it's like, oh shit, this is the decision that we're making. Okay, because at the end of the day, like, it is a decision that some people would make. And even in The Walking Dead, like, there's a lot of that theme of people already taking their own lives because they didn't want to be, like, eaten by the walkers or whatever, So like, even though it might not have been the best decision, or they didn't run the gambit of other decisions before they went to suicide, it's still a decision that I think is, as a people, like, somebody would make that choice. So I don't think it undercut anything that happened in the movie. And I think it's just like a big shock factor to just say, like, not to say anything, but as to give you something to remember, aside from, just the monsters and a mist.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is plenty of hope laced into this, or how the person perceives hope as they're going through this sort of apocalyptic conflict. And it is a very biblical type of ending. You know, you have like the Abraham, Isaac end of it. You have the Job end of it. You've had everything taken away, your family, your house, your so it is a complicated task to tack an ending on a property that doesn't have one, because the ending of the novella really wouldn't work on the screen. They just drive off and that's that. Everybody like, well, where's the third act of this movie? You know, so he was faced with a little bit of a having to construct something and then tie it into the themes of what was working there. I think when you put it in context of his first film, Shawshank Redemption, where you have someone thrust into an impossible, endless situation that they literally have to crawl their way out of, and they do so by clinging on to hope, where this is someone in the same sort of situation who neglects to have any hope, or really neglects to have any planning for a hope-filled world. He's given up on the military. He's given up on the idea of this because they've driven around and whatnot. So I think that there's some commentary there on how the individual person handles their being faced with mortality. If you want to take it to the Andre Braugher saying, no, we're going to get out of here and go. We're going to take the person doing the pills, the person who can't take the guilt of the military, so they hang themselves. You have the woman who's saying, I'm finding my kids. No one's stopping me. Is anyone coming? No. Okay, I'm going. And she makes it in the end. I think the cut of her in the end is important too. So I don't know that he's saying one specific thing as much as he's raising questions throughout the picture and throughout the concept of it, which I tend to respond a little better to anyway, rather than this movie is specifically about this, and this is what Frank Darabont thinks about this. You know, I'd say it's more,
for sure,
this is Frank Darabont asking some questions, and how do you react? Who would you be in this scenario? You know, would you be Thomas Jane rallying a crew together? Would you be a Toby who's, you know, going to kind of be the main soldier to help out a Thomas Jane? Are you going to be a Carmundi and raise chaos? I hope not. Are you gonna, you know, are you just gonna say I'm out of here? You know, who knows? So that's what I like about the ensemble nature of not just the cast and the performances, but of the story itself.
Sure. Jamie?
Yeah, I think I agree with that because like because there doesn't seem to be like one right way that anybody has like made the decision, maybe with the exception of like I need to leave to find my kids and like it works out, but like there's no way to have known that was going to work out for her, and like we don't know how she ended up like finding her kids and the military and being safe. So I feel like it's more just like kind of picking your brain around like, you know, how might you navigate a crisis? There isn't necessarily like one singular best response in like dealing with this situation, but dealing with trauma and dealing with like, you know, shock. And I think like, yes, we're seeing a lot of like the worst of humanity, but so much of like the protagonist is fighting against that and then making this decision with a smaller group of people of like, no, we're gonna leave the bad group of people because like we can't be associated with them anymore. But they're not better off either. But I don't think that it's necessarily a message of hopelessness. I think it's more of just like, you know, the uncertainty and the unknown, which I think gives a lot of anxiety for people like myself in particular. But I don't think that that's necessarily like to be equated with hopelessness. I think it's just like, you know, there are chances that you can take. Sometimes they might pay off, sometimes they might not. And like, we ultimately don't know. And like here we're presenting just like a variety of how different people respond in a crisis situation. And like, it works for some, it doesn't work for others, but like, there isn't necessarily one right or wrong way to navigate it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that obviously because our main characters make this decision, it feels like a bigger thing, but like people make choices, and whether Carol left first and the mist wasn't fully formed yet and she got home, there are just different things. This movie's saying a lot of things, and I totally agree with you. Something we haven't touched on at all, and I don't think we should probably get into this at this point, but I do want to bring it up, is that this came out in 2007. You know, this is in the middle of Bush's second term. And then, you know, so this is reflective of like a lot of what was happening just from a like a Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberal, like you could see yourself kind of in this. Things are so much, depending on how you look at the world, things are so much worse and more divided, more on each side of the spectrum. Like now, this almost doesn't feel as bad as it maybe felt then. I don't, or maybe it's just like a microcosm of that. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's important to note the context of when this came out and how effective everything happening in that grocery store was on a micro level versus the macro level of like what the US was potentially feeling with an election coming up. And that's my favorite thing about horror movies. The no question, my number one favorite thing about horror movies is how it, in a genre film, can reflect society without making us completely feel like it is us watching us. You take these extraneous circumstances, whether it's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like for the Cold War, or whether it's, something a little bit more on the nose like Get Out, or whether it's something like what did we just watch? There's obviously a million. Arrival, more sci-fi, but aliens and like about communication and how like if our communication breaks down, the world breaks down. Like there's so much within genre film that I love, and I think this does an amazing job based on when it came out, and it's still effective now because we haven't fixed things.
Yeah, I think that's where this movie's aged like a fine wine for me, because I couldn't help thinking about what the world went through in 2020. And everybody's reaction to that, and how different the perceptions of what was going on changed from month to month when we learned more. You can't do this. You have to. I don't believe in this. I believe in that. And there was a lot of people not being on the same page until we learned more. So to me, that was one of the things that struck me watching this time around, and made something this kind of apocalyptic, or however you want to describe what's going on in this movie, kind of scarily tangible because of what we experienced in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in conclusion, fix the CGI so this thing holds up 100%,
Right.
Or watch it in black and white.
Watch it in black and white. There's your answer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's segue then into our next section, brains.
Tasty.
So tasty. Jamie, I have a question for you, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you can kind of elaborate on it. So we've talked about mob mentality, especially with the Halloween movies, but let's revisit it via this movie. So my question to you is, do you think that in 2024, mob mentality would be just as effective? And I ask that because with the addition of technology and social media and people trying to brand themselves as individuals, or not being put in a certain spot, especially since we were talking political things now, like Democrat or Republican, like people are like even stepping away from both of those terms. So my question to you is, do you think that if something of the like in this movie were to happen now, like would the mob mentality look similar?
I mean, I think that there is something to like groups coming together, and like the like when there are multiple people together, that like people kind of fall back on that and like do lose some of their individuality and thinking. Like I think like there's a lot of like psychology and research in like groupthink and things like that, where like I think that, just the nature of humans, like there is still risk of that. I think like there are actively things that are happening where we're seeing that like in real time in 2024. So like I think that it will likely continue to be a thing, and maybe it looks differently with advancements in technology and like how people are coming together. But like I think that's a really interesting point too. Even if you're not physically surrounded by a group of people, are people using social media to then like connect with a group, and then they're also like prioritizing the group's ideals and values over their own ability to like think critically about what they personally believe, and like that is superseding it. So I think that like, in some ways social media is yes, helpful in allowing people to connect with others, but also harmful in like the ways that then they can be sucked into some groups that like maybe are like perpetuating harm or like aren't necessarily grounded in the same reality that we might believe in, or like they just might, you know, prioritize some of what's coming out of those groups as opposed to thinking independently for themselves. So like I imagine this will continue to be a theme like in media for sure. I don't see this stopping, because I think that like it you know it's continuing to happen.
Along those lines, so do you think that connection to human beings is something that is natural, like a primitive thing, like we are all built to be connecting with other people? So I guess the other way of seeing it is like, if you don't have the influences of people on social media, like would you still be connecting with others in a different way? I guess, I mean, of course we know life without social media, right? But like, I guess as far as mob mentality, like, is connection just such a part of us that no matter what, we will always be seeking like other people in situations, even in emergency situations, non-emergency situations, you know?
Yeah, I think that connection is part of the human experience.
Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, I think it's something that really helps like our mental health is feeling connected back to like the larger humanity. I think when we
Mm.
feel isolated, it worsens how we are feeling. And like when we're already feeling shitty, we already feel isolated because we feel like we're the only ones who are going through this or experiencing this. And so
Mhm.
like bringing it back to the collective humanity can be really helpful in like normalizing your experience and being like, I'm not the only one who's like ever felt that. Like I love as a doing like self-compassion work, bringing it back to the collective humanity is really really helpful, because if you're
Mhm.
like super self-critical, you are separating yourself from everyone else. You're like, I'm the worst person ever, I'm a failure, like I am garbage. And when you challenge that idea of like, okay, what, like, why are you thinking that about yourself? What like error or mistake did you make that has led you to believe that like you are a failure? And if you really ask
Yeah.
yourself, am I the only person in the history of time to have ever made this particular mistake? I'm going to go out on the limb and say 100% of the time, the answer is like, no, I'm not the only person who's ever made this mistake. Other people have
Mhm.
done this. I'm not alone. And like that really help, that connection back to people is real. And that's just like doing it in our own heads, but then like actually connecting with social supports is so important for our mental health. I think the, like on the flip side, you know, looking at like mob mentality, I think context is really key. And a lot of and I think some of this can also even go for like, we talked very briefly about cults I think a few times. Like I
Yes.
think there's some overlap of like what makes people susceptible to cults, and like what goes on, what's going on like psychologically that, you know, would potentially influence someone. And I think that there
Mhm.
is this like loss of identity and self-awareness that like that's like an overlap that I see with like the group think or mob mentality and like cults
Right.
as well, is like you lose yourself, and so you're like more likely to go along with the group, or like whoever the person that seemingly has like the power that is compelling to follow. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think context is really important in like where connection can be helpful versus like maybe you're connecting with people that like don't have your best interests at heart.
For sure. That's great. Well, I know Kieran had a question for you, Jamie. So, Kieran, if you would like to ask Jamie.
Sure. Yeah. There's so one kind of dynamic of this movie that we didn't do a ton of talking about yet, but you have Thomas Jane and his son basically thrust away from the wife and mother of Billy there, and put into this situation where they're
Oh,
trapped.
Billy.
Every
Coral.
time.
Hated that.
You know, mom's at home. I want my mom right now. I want my mom. And dad
Always.
can't get it. Can't. I want my wife too. I can't get it to there. What is? You just wondering if you could get a little insight on the dynamic there of father son and mom not being in the picture there. What that does on the strain on a 7-8-year-old in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's I didn't like talk about it in like my gripes, but I do find it sort of frustrating how often Thomas Jane's character is like leaving his kid with other people. And like I get it that he kind of is assuming this like leadership role and is like trying to make moves and trying to like, you know, figure out the best way to respond. But I find it very strange that he is leaving his child, who's like very clearly upset and very much wants to be by his dad's side and is like looking for that support. And he's like, hey, lady I just met, can you just like hang tight to my kid? And then like I got so pissed when there's a moment where I think I said, and Brian can confirm, that I was like, you know what, Billy deserves to get eaten by that pterodactyl right now, because like him just like going off and being like dad, and it's like the lady's like police, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, Billy,
Carl.
Carl, very much that moment. Yeah.
Billy, Dad needs to go to the pharmacy right now. All right,
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah. Calm down.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's interesting from like a psychological perspective or like child development, how children learn how to like put trust in adults and authority figures, and like that usually starts from like parents and guardians, and like, you know, there's all like everyone has their theory of child development. Eric Erikson is one of them. He has 8 stages of child development. The first one is called trust versus mistrust. And it's like literally about how infants and newborns learn to, like, they have no choice. So they have to rely on a caregiver to take care of them. And the idea behind like these different stages of child development is like we can get stuck in them if like something goes wrong, and like that can impact our development essentially. So it's interesting. This is like, I mean, in terms of Eric Erikson, like this kid who I assume is like what, like 7?
I know the actor's 9, but
okay, so like around that age, like he's older than like that developmental stage is like appropriate for, but that's what I was thinking about, of like, how can you trust, like I would be so upset because you're trying to rely on like the only like figure that's supposed to be supporting you, and then he just keeps bailing on him, and I feel like the
I would want my mom too.
Yeah, I would, like, you're not freaking here. So, like, yeah, I want my mom. Like, you're useless right now, Dad. Like, just the idea that, like, the person who's supposed to be protecting him kind of is, but also is making a lot of decisions where, like, he is putting himself at risk unnecessarily in so many ways. And I don't think that his child has the ability to, like, understand that. But I imagine that it is terrifying when you're constantly seeking out that person for you and they just keep leaving. Like, I think that would make it really hard for him to trust people, because it's like, I put my trust in this person and then they left me. And like, that's devastating. And that's going to have like a lifelong impact on him. However he frames it, of like, my dad sacrificed himself so that I would survive, or like, my dad abandoned me in a moment of crisis and like, I'll never forgive him, whatever it is. But I definitely think that if the ending of this movie maybe happened in a different way, I just feel like that kid would be so traumatized by his dad being really inconsistent in like protecting him, that like they would have to work through that in some kind of family therapy.
Well, his dad's got all the freedom in the world to be Captain America now. So.
Yikes.
Oh boy.
It's also, I know that Stephen King wrote it because like he's an artist. He was trying to, I'm sure he experienced a lot of like, even though you're a Mainer, like you don't represent Maine because you're more of an educated person. Like, I get that, like, writing what you know, but I also think it's interesting this character is an artist and he's stepping up to be a hero, when that's not the stereotypical part an artist plays in movies like this. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think that's interesting that like he's getting involved. I mean, yes, you know, artists can be wanting to be involved and egotistical and thinking they're the hero or whatever the case may be, but like it's not like he was like a local fireman and like he's the person they look to. It's a very interesting dynamic that you don't see a lot in movies, with that being the career path of the hero, if you will. That's not like stepping out of their comfort zone to be the hero.
Yeah. So you're telling me I can be a superhero, Brian? Thank you.
Of course. I would have told you that before I saw The Mist.
Aye, thanks. All right, should we wrap it up? Because I know.
Well, Kieran, did you have one more for Nikisha?
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
from an actress standpoint, we have a
Yes.
a wide ensemble cast here,
Mm-hmm.
and not your typical ensemble cast where you have like your 6 stories developed and then the actors play there. There's a lot of like little minor roles in here that the actors through their performances kind of can make a little more major with how they deliver the lines to the impact they lead. If you're an actress going into a role like this where there's a large ensemble cast in kind of a small space and you get a little time to run, what's your mentality going into that type of role?
Yeah, I think like with any role, making sure that I know my individual backstory. So then whatever the ensemble is presenting to me, I can react via what my background is, which I think is probably why Carol in this is so memorable, aside from always just trying to find her kids. It's just because it felt like she knew what her backstory was and what her drive was, what her I want, if you will, was, and she stuck with that. And you could see that through the desperation of her asking people to help her. Like Brian had mentioned, like, even though it's a crazy question to ask, like she still was asking, and it was believable that she was asking that because of her desperation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really honing in on who your character is and what their I want is, and then whatever interaction that you do have with people, like how you say your lines is a reflection of that. So I think that's how I would approach just being in an ensemble role, as opposed to like being the hero and knowing what my role is as far as being like a principal among other ensembles. It's like, no, we're all equal here and we all have equal wants and we all take those equal wants seriously as if we were the main character, right? So our desperation and our want comes from that. Making sure that we're, keeping the truth and the honesty of what our character wants and making it just as important. So everybody is on the same level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic. So should we Rotten Tomatin this?
Rotten tomato.
Let's Rotten Tomatin this bad boy.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
All right, The Mist. What do you think The Mist has on Rotten Tomatoes? What is the percent? Jamie, what's your percent?
68.
All right, Nikisha
Yeah, I was gonna say 65.
and Kieran.
We're doing critic or audience here?
Critic.
Critic. Okay. How about an even 70?
All right. The critic score is a 73%.
Nice.
Oh.
The audience score is a 65%.
Okay, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I figured that'd be a little lower.
Yeah, a little more
Yeah.
split. The critics' consensus is Frank Darabont's impressive camera work and politically incisive script make The Mist a truly frightening experience.
Yeah.
Um,
And the audience and critics was closer than I thought it would be.
Sure, that's fair.
Yeah.
My assumption is that the audience score is closer to 50% because of the ending.
Yes.
Right.
Sure.
Same.
All right, so let's do our Letterboxd thoughts. Letterboxd does everything to 5 with decimal points. So what do you think the average user score of this is? Jamie, why don't you go first?
3.3.
All right, Nikisha.
I was gonna say 2.4.
Whoa.
I know.
I think the Letterboxd might be kinder than Tomatoes because it's a little more in the last couple of years. I think that this movie's looked back on a little better than maybe it was received at the time. I'm going to go like a 3.7.
3.4.
Oh,
Okay. So
nice.
What did Jamie say?
3.3.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
nailed it.
So close.
Yeah. Cool. Fantastic. Should we do the 4 S's?
Yes.
Skull, Scare, Shakes, and Suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4 S's.
All right. The 4 S's are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. Skulls is how well this movie handles mental health and human behavior. Scares is how scary is this? And then shakes is, is this a one and done? Are you going to remember this one? That's all 1 through 10. We'll stop there, and then we'll reconvene for our suggestions. Jamie, why don't you start us off? What are your skulls, scares, and shakes?
Sure. So for Skulls, I gave it a 6. I mentioned that I had like some problems with, people's decision making and things for some parts of the movie, as well as communication. But I do think that, like, for the most part, you're seeing accurate representations of people acting in a crisis situation. You're going to get a
Sure.
variety of responses. Not everybody's going to react the same way. And I feel like that makes it more believable. For scares, I'm giving this a 4. Like, conceptually, the idea of it, I think, is really scary. I think that a lot of the practical effects that, come along with the CGI is scary, but the CGI really kind of takes away from some of the scares for me. So it's on the slightly lower end.
Mhm.
For shakes, I'm giving this a 7, mostly for the ending. I didn't remember a lot of what happened in this movie, but the ending is definitely memorable. And I think now that I've seen it for the second time, and hopefully 2 and done this time, I will also remember Marcia Gay Harden's character really well in my brain.
Sure. Kieran, you want to go next?
Sure. So I was a little nervous myself coming into this one because it had been a few years since I saw it, and I was nervous that this was going to be the kind of movie that, because I know where it's going, everything is like, all right, and now this happens, and it was very much the opposite. Like I thought the ensemble nature of the cast, the different characters, kind of putting yourself in the shoes of different aspects of this, that really helped me. So, when it came to the first part, the skulls part, I think had I had to answer this pre 2020 pandemic, I might have had a lower score, but I gave it a 7 in this. I thought there were a lot of elements in society that we've experienced in the last 3 years that bring this movie into a new light for me. So I give it a nice solid 7 there for that. There was some characters and, stereotypical types of, biker guy, and that stuff. It's like,
we didn't even talk about him.
Yeah.
That's so
we did, because that was the guy whose legs got
right. We did.
Oh,
right?
we talked about his legs.
We talked about half of him.
We get biker Ken and soldier Ken and gas
Yeah,
station
yeah.
Ken.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the 7 there. Scares. I went with the. Do you do 0.5s?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so maybe a 6.57 is where I'm kind of in that, but 6.5. There were actually a few things in this that I was like, ugh, like the bug biting her on the neck, and then her like face growing. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like the guy getting lit on fire, and it's like there's a bunch of stuff. The pharmacy scene's really creepy. So there were some things here that were, but this isn't like a truly scary, like hide under your covers type of movie. So I think it's more like dread and like cringe kind of stuff. So I gave it a 6.5 there. And then, shakes, I'm going with a 10. I love this movie. I love this property. I love the short story. This stuck with me ever since I read the pages of it in the novella. I actually, believe it or not, coincidentally enough, this is my last show and tell of the day, I promise. I was in the used bookstore this week, knowing we're getting this, and sure enough, the first edition.
Whoa!
Skeleton Crew.
Wow.
Cool.
With the monkey on the front.
Nice.
Yeah, crazy. The first edition right there, and $7.
Cool.
Very cool.
So there was coincidence there, but so like I said, this is one I'm happy I got the black and white version now. This is something I'll revisit probably again next October. Might be a horror season regular for me here. So a good clean 10 there as the guest coming in, hyping the film. There you go.
Cool. Nikisha.
Yeah, so Skulls, I gave it a 6. I appreciated the decisions that they were kind of making, so I'll leave it at that. Scares, it was a 3. There wasn't anything that like jump scare got me, but the ending is what really was just like, holy shit. And And then Shakes, I gave it a 7 as well, because I will definitely just remember this movie, truly everything about it, from the church lady and her crazy like sermons that she was giving to the ending,
Yeah.
because it was very disturbing. So yes.
Yeah, I gave it a 7 for Skulls. I think that I think it's really trying, and I think it nails a high percent of it. I take up some points for the end being a big swing without kind of like logistically making sense for the characters. But the big swing is a big swing enough. For scares, I gave it a 6, not only for like the rope scene and some of the other like types of moments, but any religious mob makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so that just bumps up from maybe like a 4 or a 3 or a 4. But I gave that a 6. And Shakes, I'm giving this an 8. I think, as we discussed, the ending really makes this movie pop. I am excited to watch this in black and white. So that kind of is like, I know I'm gonna not right now, but I'll eventually rewatch this like in black and white. I think this will always make a list of like horror endings. I think this will always make a list on like bottle movies, one location movies, even though it's multiple, but you know what I mean. I think this will always make the list of like character driven horror movie. This movie fits a lot of lists that I would always suggest to people potentially, and the ending and I think that the positives from this movie outweigh the nitpicks, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
In general. But suggestions, I'll start with my suggestions. Kieran spoiled one of mine earlier in this podcast. The Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. It's about, I mean, I won't spoil it, but like this is what you would watch alongside this one 100%. Some other movies that I would suggest are from last year, Brooklyn 45. If you were looking for a really good like bottle movie where people have relationships and they're trying to work things out from past stuff, really good stuff. Identity is another good one, where you have different characters representing different things, trying to get things done. If you wanted some more creepy monsters within like an area, you go Annihilation. And then the ultimate stuck in a place we're all going crazy, The Thing, which was presented at the very beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
In as Kieran mentioned in his 2-minute summary, the Stephen King Easter egg section of this film.
Nice.
Kieran, you want to go next?
Yeah, I to make you feel better, Brian, I spoiled mine as well. Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later would be the first place I would go.
For sure.
I love an auteur's version of a genre film, and that's what Danny Boyle brings. And Cillian Murphy, who's become obviously very, very famous since then, puts forth a really great lead role. And another Oscar-nominated actress in that too, from I think Moonlight. Her name is escaping me.
Naomi Harris.
Yes. Yeah, great actress there too. So that's a really good one. From a literary standpoint, I would recommend a short story that definitely influenced this property too, and that would be Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. If anyone's read that one out there, a real chilling mob mentality, sort of religious mob type of thing. So yeah, check out The Lottery too there.
And that's a great suggestion. Well, they both are, but 28 Days Later, with the news that they are developing a 28 Years Later with Danny Boyle directing, and Alex Garland is writing it again. So
he is. He's
super excited for that. And
Cillian Murphy, I think, is back too.
Yeah, so I'm very into all of that. Speaking of Alex Garland Annihilation, but Nikisha, what are some of yours?
I mean, I just have to suggest the seasons of The Walking Dead, specifically the barn, the season when they're all in the barn, because Sophia, what a reveal, and the season when they're in the prison, because talk about tough decisions for the greater good. That was a hard season to watch. So that's it for me.
Jamie?
Yeah, I went with the mysterious creature route. So my suggestions include A Quiet Place and Bird Box. But also, if you want to throw in some kind of mist-ish, Silent Hill.
Oh,
Sure.
fantastic.
I guess it's like foggy.
Yeah, sirens.
There's a little
Yeah,
bit.
sirens. I honestly, when that siren went off in this movie, it very much reminded me of Silent Hill.
That's so funny. It reminded me of Beyonce's song "Ring the Alarm." If you know.
It
That
reminded
siren
me.
came on, and I was like, "Where's Beyonce?" Okay, cool.
Amazing.
It reminded me of what was going to happen if I didn't get that 2-minute thing done in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this wraps up our episode of The Mist. You can find us on all social media platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, @TalkHorrorPod. Also, thank you once again to Kieran for coming here as a guest. For one more time, Kieran, tell us where they can find you on the socials and everywhere.
Yeah, everything is Best Picture Cast, just as it sounds. You can search for us on any podcast platform, any social media platform. We're interactive, so we love when people listen to an episode and then come back with questions or criticisms and all that. 5 stars, please. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Right.
Best Picture Cast. Check us out. We do a whole bunch of different stuff. And thanks for having me, guys. This is a blast. I love to be in a part of it.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to come back. We'll have to find a Mist adjacent to have a part 2 for this.
And maybe we'll do like Care Bears Halloween special or something next time.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And producer Brian, where can they listen to us?
Yeah, just like Best Picture Cast, you can find us wherever you get podcasts, Spotify. You can find us on YouTube. Hi, YouTube. And then, of course, you can find us Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review us there. 5 stars, please. What? Oh, man. That was crazy.
Fireworks
Nikisha.
on Nikisha's
There were-
screen.
Now you have to watch the YouTube because Nikisha just had fireworks behind her. I don't know what happened.
Not just not like behind her out of a window, like literally like in the room with her.
What was that? What just?
That was perfect.
That was.
I don't know what just happened.
That was crazy.
I'm sorry to distract. Yes.
No, you didn't distract
No, that was
anything. That's what we
incredible.
want the stars to look like when you rate us.
That's it.
Yeah. But yeah, Kieran, I want to second what Jamie and Nikisha said. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy that you picked this movie because I don't know if we ever would have outside of that. Yeah, this was really fun. Thanks for bringing so much to the conversation.
Oh, of course. Like I said, I love listening. I was just listening to you guys Saw X episode the other day, and I was literally laughing out loud. Jamie's reading off the triggers, and she's just like, I mean, your legs, heads getting chopped off, brain surgery, and this is the line that got, like, you're just so numb to it, and this is the line that got me. You're like, waterboarding with blood. I'm like, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
That is,
Yeah.
that's exactly what happens.
Waterboarding with blood. Here we are.
But yeah, thanks, guys. It's a blast.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you guys for listening to us. Make sure you check out Kieran's podcast as well. But we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.